Olá pessoal, muito boa tarde. Hoje é dia 15 de outubro e nós estamos começando uma série de diálogos aqui sobre aquilo que o Google promoveu em São Paulo, um evento chamado Think with Google. E, em especial, esse evento vai ser totalmente em inglês, porque a gente tem convidados aqui que falam inglês. Então nós vamos bater um papo com eles. Vocês estão participando dessa gravação ao vivo, estamos transmitindo através do YouTube Live e sejam bem-vindos então. Eu tenho um convidado aqui comigo, que é o Thiago, que vai fazer a introdução e a apresentação dos nossos convidados, né, Thiago?
Exatamente.
So, from now, we go in English.
A little bit in Portuguese, just to
Okay, a little bit
with.
in Portuguese. So,
Isso. Bom, obrigado pelo convite, por estar aqui com vocês. A gente hoje inaugura então a série que é o Think, que acompanha os eventos Think que o Google desenvolveu há cerca de um mês no Brasil, muito focado em cada uma das indústrias, com olhar do que é o futuro e do que vem pela frente. Hoje a gente começa uma sequência que é para manter essa conversa viva. A gente começa uma sequência hoje de Thinks, no caso Hangouts, né, sobre os eventos Think. E aí eu tenho o prazer de começar isso falando da indústria de turismo, que é uma das indústrias que eu lidero no Google Brasil. Então, para isso, como já adiantamos aqui, temos dois convidados. A partir de agora eu passo para o inglês, para que a gente já comece essa conversa, esse bate-papo com eles, tá?
Great. Let's go.
All right. So, introducing my two colleagues here who are in this hangout with me, we have Jane Butler, who works for Google, and she's now in California, in Mountain View. Hi, Jane.
Hi, nice to see you again, Thiago.
Nice to see you again. She was here for the Think event. She did an amazing presentation. She's now the global director for vertical search and very experienced on the travel business. And we have also Gerd Leonhard. Hi, Gerd.
Hello there.
Good to see you again. He's the futurist and CEO of the Futures Agency. And we had a pleasure to have him here also at that time in August. And now we are facing each other's here on the Hangout on Air. It's a very good opportunity to keep the conversation that you guys and myself started a couple of months ago. So I would like to kick off here our chat by asking to Gerd, which is what I think a good warm-up question. Based on what you spoke here in São Paulo, Gerd, you said that we should feel the future, right, during your speech. So I'd like to tell us now, in your opinion, what is the best way for us to do that, to make it tangible, to feel the future on our daily routine?
Yeah, I think that the concept of thinking about the future is a very good start. But in the end, what it comes down to is that there's quite a few things that we can see today that we know will be true in just 3 to 5 years. Just like 10 years ago, we knew that music was going to be in the cloud, Spotify or so, and nobody really wanted it to be in the cloud, but now it is. So if we look 10 years into the future and then go backwards, it's really more about getting a feel for the future and accepting what happens or developing a sort of an intuition, what I call foresights. And I think a lot of foresights are not exactly like left brain. I'm not running a spreadsheet to figure out my future. I'm basically, I need to be a little bit more intuitive and consider a few other things around the facts. And this is why I think it's important to feel the future rather than just think it.
Right, perfect. I mean, that's a good start, and I'd like to hear Jane of what's your opinion towards on the travel experience. What is in your point of view the tools or the experiences online that the traveler or the user can touch or feel this future in his hands nowadays regards to the travel experience?
Well, I think so much of it is going mobile and going on the road with you. So it's not about it is now a digital experience from the time that you're planning your trip or researching your trip all the way through physically getting on the plane or in the car, checking into your hotel. So you can already see things through the form of, clearly the booking part of it is already happening online and has been doing so for years. That increasingly it's things like your mobile device as your boarding pass or as your room key, which is increasingly starting to happen. In fact, I think in Switzerland that was happening even a few years ago in a few hotels. So so the mobile device becoming your constant companion to not only book and experience your travel, but to research things that you can do while you're online. So I think that's probably the most tangible part of the future that we're going to start to see further explode in both popularity and potential in not only the coming years but the coming months. Things are happening so quickly, especially in the mobile frontier.
Do you mind? I'm very curious about this conversation because both of them, they seems to see the future, right? How do you do that? Can you explain how do you see the future? I'm looking at the Gerd.
Question.
Yeah, you seems to be a futurist. How do you live in the future, or how do you
Are
see
we in
the
the
future?
past now?
Yeah. Can you say
No,
something?
I think it's really quite simple. I focus on the things that are one step beyond the obvious. And I think if you're in business today, you always have to go at least 1 or 2 steps beyond the obvious because the speed is mind-boggling. I mean, if you're looking at like Google Field Trip today, you know, the app that shows you what's around you, and you're thinking of that 5 years into the future, it's not too far-fetched to imagine that this becomes what Marshall McLuhan called the extension of man, the external brain. So with a little bit of imagination and fantasy and observing, you can sort of safely anticipate things that are in the sort of range of 5 years, not 20 years or 50 years. That probably takes more of a scientist. But I mean, the stuff that's already here today, it's fairly obvious if you take your time to look. So the problem that I see with many of my clients, large companies and people who are quite busy, is that they're always chasing next week's revenue, and therefore some of them may not have next year's revenue. Because this is sort of the short-term thinking that is in the way of us understanding the future.
It's incredible.
Yes, I know it's not a very popular sport in Brazil, but I'm married to a Canadian, so everything for us is in metaphors around ice hockey. And so Wayne Gretzky, they call him the Great One, his famous quote was, "Skate to where the puck is going." So it very much speaks to what Gerd was talking about, that the idea that you can't just be looking down at your feet about where the puck or the football is today. You have to think about where it's going and then try to figure out how you're going to intercept that pass or be ready for it. And living, especially being here on main campus for Google, you see how our engineers and product people are really thinking about how those applications can come to life. And it's a relatively practical point of view. It's just, if we want to be able to do this simpler, easier, faster, and we break away from today's confines, how might that look? And we're blessed with the resources to help play and invest in a lot of those technologies and really play things out. And Google Glass, which is incorporating this field trip, which is like having a tour guide on your shoulder, be able to speak to you as you look around the room or look around the museum or out on a hiking trail and be able to tell you what you're looking at, is kind of bringing that wish to life using some fun technology. So it's a very inspiring place to walk around this campus at.
And how do you both see companies, not of course the technology ones or the Google likes companies, but the travel ones? How do you see those companies following the user on this experience, or more than that, building up the pathway to make it tangible? I mean, to bring the future closer to the days of today.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
do you have any example to mention about? I mean, any travel company which is foreseeing this and implementing things on a more fast way, so that we as users or consumers can use their tools or can have the more tangible experience of good initiatives on that?
Yeah, I think some of you may know this new book by Rita McGrath, who is a strategist professor talking about strategy. And I think her name is Rita Gunter McGrath. And it's talking about basically how this whole idea of sustainable advantage is going away, and it's being replaced by what she calls a transient advantage, which means taking advantage of a window and then hopping onto the next window rather than constantly, fixing the current window. And this is a very interesting scenario. So I see travel companies, for example, looking at this and saying, how can we create something that's going to be true for the next 5 years or 10 years? And this is kind of looking backwards. It's like you go 240 miles an hour and you look in the rear mirror the whole time. And of course you'll have an accident. Right. So looking forward today means, because of the exponential speed of technology, it means using imagination. And using this sort of, one step beyond kind of thinking. And I think there's companies, for example, in credit card companies, who are now saying that credit cards as we know it will go away, and now we're going to have the connected credit card, right? There's one company in particular, I'll think of it in a second what they're called, CardSpring, I think it's what they're called, where the card connects to like apps that you can download onto the card. And so they're thinking of the card as a platform, not just as a card. And this is really the kind of thing that Rita McGrath calls this the arena thinking. So we're thinking about the whole arena of travel and the services, not just about the industry, but about the whole arena around it. Because most of the change will come from people outside of the current business. Innovators who are not actually travel companies yet.
Yeah, I would concur with that. My observation so far that traditional travel companies are still having a hard time adapting to the new realities. They are frequently built, their technology is frequently built off of old systems, so they're having a hard time just adapting their systems to the speed and the pace of expectation on the part of the users. I think there's a lot of desire and acknowledgement that this is where things are heading, but they feel a little handicapped or slow in being able to adapt. And what you see is essentially traditional companies are making incremental changes, and new companies are coming in and just redefining how things should look. So if you look at any of the online travel agencies as one starting point, they have clearly rewritten how that has looked, and now the traditional players are starting to catch up. One of my favorite examples in the travel space is Airbnb, because they just created a whole new model, and their experience is beautiful. It's simple. It just works. They don't have all the baggage that comes with a lot of longer-standing brands, and so it's really about breaking apart from your old thinking. And if you were to start your company today, how would you operate? How would you look? What would your product be like? Versus thinking in these very incremental steps. Now that's very daunting, but in terms of if you really want to rethink your product to the way it should, and your experience and your engagement with your customers, you do need to take on a really fresh take to be able to keep up. Otherwise, you'll just kind of putter along pretty slowly.
Yeah, interesting here in Europe, for example, when I do sessions with tourist organizations or hotel groups or airlines, I often say, there's two things you should do. One is you spend the next 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, if you can, doing everything that you do otherwise only with a mobile phone. And that's what when you discover what the future is, because that's what everybody's doing. And that's what the kids are doing, and that's what your future clients are doing, and that's how people are going to buy stuff. 80-90% of internet traffic will be mobile. And it will not be called computing in that sense anymore, right? And so it's a gesture, the touch screen, the location, this extreme way of using the mobile as a second brain, which has some issues, of course, but at the same time, you learn about how people are actually doing this rather than what you want them to do. And the second thing is that you have to forget about this idea of having an information advantage. What's called information disparity, that you as a company know more about whatever that you're doing than your client, which is just no longer true. I mean, I can find out anything as a customer, and I can know more about my problem when I go to the doctor than a doctor who's 65 years old and never used the internet before. Right? So information disparity is dead. I mean, you don't have an information advantage. You have you may have a wisdom advantage, hopefully, as a company, but an information advantage is evaporating. So if you rely on that for your business, then you're just going to be the next record labels, basically.
I think another angle to that is around the user focus, because I think so often companies, they can't get out of their own box, right? They just keep thinking about their own business models, their own challenges with IT and so forth, and the poor customer is the one that is the last on the list in terms of their priorities and the consideration. And I think that's something that has helped us move quickly at Google, is that we are constantly focused on the user needs, how do we best serve the user, and then we kind of work backwards from there. And it's not something, we haven't trademarked focus on the user. It should be something that everyone adopts. And I think, to your point, Gerd, if you walk around with your mobile phone and you're thinking and acting like a user, it will dramatically change how you think about your business, how to simplify and focus. But there's, I know I mentioned in my speech when I was in Sao Paulo about there's the World Economic Forum is working on this project called Connected World. Sorry, the light just went out. It's motion activated, so I'm doing exercises here. There we go.
Yeah, you have to jump up and down.
So the yeah, exactly. So they have a group of folks who are from dozens of global companies across transportation, travel, IT, all trying to get together and talk about what the future of travel is like. And I was just in a New York meeting where they had all these task force companies represented for the task force, and we were talking about the future of an integrated, proactive intermodal travel assistant. And everyone agreed this is where things are going, and so few of the companies were willing to engage on how to make that possible because they were all protecting their own turfs about, well, I don't, this is my data and I don't want to engage this way, and I don't, and I think we as Google are able to let go a lot of the kind of traditional business model constraints and think a bit more freely. And so my point was, we're going to kind of keep doing these things, and if you guys would like to join on, come along. We'll have fun if you want to play. But there was a lot of kind of swirling around. I just don't think that we would be willing to make that jump, and I think the more pervasive that thinking, the farther behind a company will get left.
They mentioned, you guys mentioned about cell phones, and I'm curious about it because Thiago and I, we live in a country that has more cell phones than people, right?
Yes.
I think we have 2 cells per
more or less.
I don't know. Well, in a country like this, that we have more cell phones than people, what kind of competitive advantage you think that we can do or can make or can have?
Foster, yes.
Yeah.
I would like to link your question to another thought because of just what Jane and Gerd just said. In regards to the travel experience, if you could split in 5 parts, 4 or 5 parts, as Jane used to use this kind of matrix in the past, which is first you have the researching and dreaming, then you have first you have the dreaming, then you have the research / planning, then you have the purchase, and then experience the trip itself or the travel experience itself, and after that sharing. Bringing the mobile perspective into this and the innovative approach. In which of these steps would you consider that the travel companies are less innovative?
Well, maybe you should phrase the question, say which ones they're not. Well, Jane, you want to go first on this, or?
I think there's probably been more focus on the actual experiencing part of things right now. So people recognize that this is a good, airlines move quickly with the mobile boarding passes. So that's once you're actually already on your trip and about to go through the airport. I think there's been greater recognition of being able to use the mobile device for finding activities, looking at reviews, and that kind of thing once you're traveling. But there's been a lot of slowness and trepidation on mobile commerce. Although it's growing quickly, I don't think the industry has moved fast enough to rise to the consumer expectation. And we have launched some things with our Google Wallet to be able to help facilitate that in working with partners. So we hope that will remove some of the friction in m-commerce that exists today. But I think that will be probably the next big pop, is a recognition that people do want to book on their mobile phones, and that the industry needs to keep up with it. And then I think it will continue to add on from there.
I think the bottom line with most of these issues comes down to what I experienced when I worked in the music business for 10 last years. I'm sorry. No, but when I worked on the music business, it comes down to one big item, and that is control, right? So if you are looking to retain control because of your information advantage, or you don't want to be transparent on pricing, or you're looking to hide something that just isn't quite there, or you're trying to keep something back from the customer that he may find out that he has an advantage on. You're looking to essentially create some sort of control situation where you want to have the cake and you want to eat it at the same time, right? And that's of course very true for large companies. This is nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying is, like, I think ultimately what it comes down to, when the consumer realizes that this is the game, and it's sort of like a Faustian bargain. They trust people that they work with, and then it turns out that it's not quite the same. That becomes sort of a letdown, and then the whole relationship breaks down, and then social media is toast, and the whole thing turns into the wrong direction, right? So it's all about control and trust. And people buy stuff because they are in control, not us, the providers, right? And they also buy stuff because they trust their providers. And this is really what it comes down to. When you use a mobile phone, you have to give them that control and not try to get back through it to the back door. So what I call, basically trying to create a mousetrap after you create an opening. So it's, and this is a very common problem, for example, with airlines, because clearly the information advantages, it means real money in the end of the day. So there has to be a balance between the give and take, between the open and the closed, to create a fruitful situation. But it's going to be very hard, I think, to retain your advantage over the consumer while at the same time trying to build a relationship with them. And this is really what the whole social local mobile comes down to. You're building a relationship, and therefore it's much more important to engage than to encage, as I call it, to put people into a cage.
Bringing this context, and also based on the experience that you guys had personally when you came to Brazil a couple of months ago, what would be your most important advice to Brazilian companies looking for the World Cup and other big events that we are hosting in a couple of next years? Meaning, and I really like to have it like a personal approach on this answer, because you guys just came down here, you faced what it is, the whole experience of traveling to Brazil, or coming to Brazil, or even São Paulo, which is a more chaotic scenario. But what would be your advice to Brazilian travel companies? Meaning, what's the opportunity that you guys faced towards or take into consideration your travel experience to Brazil?
Well, I know, just starting at the very beginning, the visa process was something that was kind of new for me, at least for the U.S. side of things, and that takes a lot of planning. And so even if you're trying to welcome visitors to Brazil, to make sure that they are well informed and feel like you as a Brazilian travel or tourism company are inviting them and making it easy for them to get through the process of not only booking their travel, but figuring out all the kind of bits and pieces that they need to have organized to get down there. Figuring out how to the transport itself into the city or to the events. I was asking my taxi driver on the way out kind of where everything was, because I was stuck in 2.5-hour traffic to get to the airport, and trying to figure out all those pieces. So there's a lot of logistical things that being able to kind of help people navigate through that on a very basic level. But the other impression I had was and I've told you this, Chuck, I loved the people that I met there, and somehow being able to showcase that. And I do remember some of the Brazilian Tourism Office had done a good job of reflecting the culture in their YouTube channel. This was a year or two ago, but I somehow blending the passion of the Brazilian people and just how welcoming. I think packaging that with how making it easy and just making it work, because that's the other thing that I think Brazil will probably be most challenged with, is it's going to be difficult to make all these pieces work. So whatever you can do to kind of simplify and smooth the rough edges, I think will go a long way.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Brazil maybe a dozen times or something. So mostly to Rio and Sao Paulo, and maybe Belo Horizonte. And I've been to Porto Alegre as well. Yeah. But so I have a little bit of experience there. But I think as far as e-commerce and mobile and technology goes, the most important thing about Brazil, in my view, is to create an ecosystem that is uniquely Brazilian in terms of what it does and how it does it. For example, the whole debate about what you do with people's data. We have, we have a lot of issues with that in Europe, But looking at the US, there are major issues about what happens with people's data. And of course, Google is right in the middle of this. But I think it's very important for Brazilians to figure out, what's okay to do with data and what's not, and to not yield to the temptation of abusing people's data. And this is what it's really going to come down to when you have a country of, 220 million people. You're going to need people to feel safe with what they're doing on those devices. Otherwise, they'll eventually retract, like people are starting to do in Europe and other places. And you also need to build a sustainable business, so sustainable in the sense of, that you don't addict people to devices, but at the same time also sustainable in terms of, hotels, airlines, and what you do with the infrastructure. Clearly, what's happening in Sao Paulo is not sustainable. And so, the idea of everybody buying a car is madness, right? So I think this is very important for Brazil to find its own way forward, to be sustainable, to not abuse people's data, to think of a collective approach to solving problems, and not necessarily copy the things that used to work 30 years ago in America. Because they may have worked back then, but they're not working anymore. So sure. I think this is crucial for Brazil to figure that out, because technology is not a panacea. It's not going to solve all of those problems.
Right.
Especially when you think about the World Cup is going to attract a very international audience that will come in with some high expectations, right? So I think being aware of that and thinking through kind of some priorities around what will be most important to visitors and making that experience smooth and understanding what visitors will come to expect, what their potential challenges and opportunities and excitement areas will be, and then being able to play to that. But I think it's a tremendous opportunity, but it's going to be a big challenge, I think, as well.
So I bring this question for you that is here in Brazil. What's your perspective of the World Cup and Olympics? And
no, I agree with them on the part that maybe business opportunities are on areas that maybe the government would be if it could be doing a good job, you wouldn't have the problem with logistics or transportation constraints and etc. And then it opens the door to business people to maybe create a better tools or better landscape on exploring this kind of constraints of resources constraints. So my perspective is that there's even being Brazilian is complicated sometimes to go from here to there or to travel in the countryside of Brazil. So every time I'm traveling, I try to understand what would be a foreigner perspective of the same travel experience that I'm having as a Brazilian, because somehow there are some cases that we struggle a lot to find either where to go or where is a good place to go and etc. So my perspective is that maybe the foreigners are going to struggle a little bit when they come down here. But as Jane mentioned, we have this very good spirit of hospitality or of being opening ourselves to foreigners and to receive people in a very good manner here in Brazil. So at the end of the day, people compensate the lack of infrastructure. But I understand that also this is not a professional way of looking into things. We don't have to have this amateur approach as we've been having, but at the end of unfortunately, we count on much more on private and private initiatives to kind of close the gap than government ones.
Well,
but at least you have the J-Genio, right? What was it called? J-Genio? You have that.
Yeah, that's right. Genio.
Yeah. Genius.
Make stuff up, improvise.
We are talking about future, Gerd, not past, man. We are talking about future.
Well, I wish that was the future. Here in Switzerland, we never had that.
Oh, that's right. So we can talk about Star Trek, maybe teletransportation, things like that. Yeah, I had a question for you, but we don't have much time here. But I was at TED conference maybe 2 years ago, and I saw there a Google presentation about the Google car. There was a self-driven car, right? I was very impressed about that thing. It was an amazing thing for me. And just a couple of months after that, I read in a newspaper, an American newspaper, that there is a state in U.S. that changed the law allowing the car to be used by normal people everywhere. I think it's Nevada. I'm not sure, but I think it's Nevada.
I think it was California.
It was California, right?
Yeah.
I was impressed with the car, but with that move so fast, I think we have some restrictions here in Brazil to do that.
Yeah.
Changing the laws is not easy.
Yeah.
So to accept all this new technology, when I saw the car, the future seems to be too far to see that car on the streets.
Yeah.
But just a couple of months, we are watching that going on, right?
I agree. So I think that the good part behind is that not just changing the laws, but having people prepared to understand what's going on outside. You have this approach. You have the data approach that Gerd just mentioned. So it's having the infrastructure, let's put it this way, behind, meaning legal people or all those lawyers to understand what is changing and how fast it's changing, and how to adapt fast the way they think to have the society ready for the future, right? So I don't know what do you have in mind about it, Jane, but my perspective is that this is crucial for the growth of any digital business. Also, I mean, the whole infrastructure on the legal and politics and etc. behind it to grow together with the technology.
Yeah, it doesn't always go hand in hand. I think I'm sure this is true in every country, a lot of rules and laws and legislation were written decades ago, if not longer, and they were designed for a very different society and a different time. And there are examples when it comes to you never probably thought about having to allow a car that doesn't have a driver behind the wheel actually on the roads, but it's probably something that we need to think about. And I think a lot of that is a nod to Silicon Valley and being at the heart of so much innovation that they were willing to engage on that front. The other example I think about, which is much more basic, but Tesla, which is the 100% electric car that has been manufactured here in California, has gone direct to users or direct to consumers in their sales showrooms, but they don't have dealers. And to actually set that up so that they were selling direct to consumer, and by the way, it's like going to an Apple store. A lot of it is done online. It is a completely different experience than is typical of the negotiation that you might have with the dealer representative. But here in the U.S., dealer franchises have been protected in laws for years and years at the state level. And so Tesla found a way in working in Washington and on the state legislation to if you had one dealership, then you were kind of caught under this rule of like all the dealers are protected and everyone must be able to work this way. And they kind of found their way out. But as a consumer, I much prefer to deal with a company like Tesla who makes the experience actually pleasant, to go in there and look at the product online, or even buying it is all like clicking off of a mouse pad. There's no hour-long negotiations with anyone in the back room. And so again, it's designed for current day expectations, yet caught up in a lot of the red tape and legal rules of a bygone era. So this will take time, but I think there are some innovators who speak to the consumer value proposition versus the protection of companies that may not be adding the same level of value. And I think ultimately that will win out, but it's going to take a long time.
Cool, perfect.
Yeah, I think we're entering a period of where the technology is now so good and so fast and so powerful and also very addictive in many cases, that now it's invariably every question of technology is also an ethical question now. For example, the self-driving car, the robot car, as some people call it, cannot drive anywhere without having publicly available data that is fed into the car at 400 megabits a second, to even allow it to go 1 feet. It couldn't go, and that data has to come from somewhere. And then there's questions about, what if we have lots of these kind of cars, can a regular person still drive the same way that they want to drive, or do they have to actually consider the robot cars and change their way of driving? So there are ethical issues, there are cultural issues, and there are new social contracts that we're going to have to write. For example, Google Glass, and eventually the brain implant, which will be right after that. We call it the iGoogle head or whatever. We're going to see the challenge of figuring out how to create a social contract around these new technologies. And so now technologies at that point, which Ray Kurzweil calls very soon the singularity, how these issues are actually going to impact what we want to do as humans and what we should be doing rather than what we can be doing. Right? And so we're at that point now very soon, and the self-driving car is one of those first issues where we have to think about, okay, what should the rules be? Should people in Sao Paulo not be allowed to buy a car? And should they get public electric cars as a consequence? Or, what is the right thing to do?
It's a fantastic theme for another, hangout, because when you talk about ethics, you can spend a whole day here. That's great.
I just want to clarify that there is no announcement around a embedded chip in your head.
Okay.
That is Gerd talking about it being a futurist and where things could go. But just to confirm, there is.
And I mean, clearly, in technical terms, that's the next step. First you type, then you talk, then you blink, then you think. It's and that is the next step. Hopefully Google will not tackle that step, but that's kind of a logical consequence. As we've seen in Total Recall or whatever. So, Minority Report.
So my brain will be part of the Google search, right? We're gonna Google search and gonna into my brain and everybody's brain.
I hope you're not drunk.
You're not drunk. Well, probably here at Vila Madalena it's not gonna work very well, but anyway, that's
for sure.
Okay, guys, I want to thank you for this time, for this hangout. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you soon.
Sure. Very nice talking to you guys. Thank you very much. See you later.
Nice to see you again. Thank you.
Tchau,
Thanks.
gente. Obrigado. É um prazer.
Thank you.
Obrigado.
Thiagão, obrigado, viu?
Obrigado, valeu. Foi ótimo.
Obrigado.
Conte comigo aí.
Obrigado, Ricardo. Obrigado vocês que estiveram com a gente. Bom, a gente volta no próximo, acho que amanhã tem uma programação toda pela frente aí, né? Tá bom. Obrigado, pessoal. Um abraço para todos.